Chu Yuan's life at Changyuan Company was far from the dream he had imagined. The internship, which was supposed to be a stepping stone to success, turned into a routine of humiliation. As the newcomer, he was treated as if he were invisible, or worse, like a servant with no right to even breathe easy. The pressure was constant. He had to endure other people's arrogance and take on tasks no one else wanted, like serving coffee to those who thought they were superior. As he worked the machine, his blood boiled. He hadn't studied so hard to become an errand boy for entitled people, but his thoughts were cut short by the presence of Xiao Raken. She already had experience at the company and came from the same college as him, and she didn't sugarcoat anything. She told him to wake up to reality. If he kept accepting everything with his head down, the world would walk all over him without mercy. Yuan was shaken by the reality check. In that moment of distraction, disaster struck. The boiling liquid overflowed, burned his hand, and soaked his clothes. The pain from the burn was nothing compared to the embarrassment when Raken tried to help clean the mess. He froze, not knowing where to look, struggling to keep his composure in front of the senior employee. But the day still had more poison in store. The boss, wearing a cynical smile, ordered Yuan to carry stacks of autumn gift boxes to every department. It was heavy, pointless work for an intern, but the superior used the old excuse that it builds character. Raken tried to help, but the man pushed her aside. In a gesture of pure contempt, he threw the load of gifts straight into Yuan's chest. The impact was sharp. The boxes burst open, and their contents scattered across the floor. The man even had the nerve to blame the intern, watching mockingly as Yuan knelt down to pick up the mess. Yuan didn't explode on the spot, only because he desperately needed the money. At that breaking point, his phone vibrated in his pocket. A strange notification promised a turning point, a chance to take control of his own fate. Acting on desperation, he approved the download. What happened next defied all logic. The air tore apart, a yellow flash filled everything, and a portal swallowed him whole. He landed hard in a place that looked like the end of the world. The ground was cold, the air reeked of death, and the silence was broken by scratching sounds and growls. When he looked back, terror took shape. A mass of decomposing bodies, a real horde of zombies, was climbing over the fences to get to him. In the middle of the panic, a technological interface lit up before his eyes. The apocalyptic tycoon system was active. The rules were clear. Survive in this hell, collect gold and crystals, and trade them for wealth in the real world. He would have the power to travel between dimensions, but with a 12-hour cooldown. Before the idea of becoming a billionaire could even sink in, the final crash came. The fence holding back the monsters couldn't take the pressure and collapsed. Now there were no barriers left between the intern and death. Heart pounding out of his chest and the gift boxes still clutched in his hands, Yuan watched the wave of undead surge forward like a nightmare tsunami. Yuan was in total despair as he ran for his life, fleeing from that mass of undead. He screamed for help, his lungs burning, praying for a miracle. And the miracle came with the sound of an explosion. Out of nowhere, a girl appeared in the middle of the chaos and, with unbelievable courage, started throwing grenades into the zombie crowd. The blasts were brutal. In seconds, the monsters chasing Yuan were wiped out. Shaking, he ran to thank his savior. The young woman explained that her job was to clear the settlement area, and Yuan's presence had actually helped by drawing the targets together. Wanting to return the favor, he took one of the gifts he had brought from the real world, a mooncake. She had never seen anything like it, but decided to take a bite. Her reaction was immediate. She was stunned by the flavor and admitted she had never eaten anything so wonderful. She refused to take the sweet for free, since in that harsh world nothing came easy. She paid Yuan with pure gold. He almost fell over from shock at the amount, and she even gave him a kip. Raise the price. This stuff is worth a fortune here. Before leaving, she introduced herself as Lin's son, leaving Yuan speechless. With gold in hand and an idea in mind, he headed to the settlement market, a rough place where everything was sold, from rifles to worthless junk. Yuan set up his stall and began advertising the mooncakes. Within moments, a crowd gathered. No one had seen a dessert like that since the world ended.
When he announced that each gram cost a gram of gold, people thought he was crazy. But Yuan, quick-witted, used his final argument. Life is short, and the apocalypse is here. If you don't eat this luxury now, when will you? When you're in a coffin? The tactic worked. A burly mercenary decided to take the risk and bought 50 grams. At the first bite, he nearly cried with emotion. The flavor was so divine that he immediately ordered another 100 grams in different varieties. Seeing that, the rest of the crowd went into a frenzy. Everyone wanted a piece of that sugary paradise. By the end of the day, Yuan's profit was unreal, 60 grams of gold. It was more money than he would earn in years of slave labor at that miserable company. But good times never last. As he counted his earnings, a hoarse, malicious voice whispered in his ear, "Don't move." A cold blade pressed against Yuan's ribs. A bandit who had been watching all day gave him the ultimatum, hand over all the gold or die right there. The intern froze, feeling the weight of another man's greed against his chest. The bandit didn't just want the gold. The bastard was already planning to stab him and dump the body to leave no trace. But Yuan's luck turned in the final second. The system chimed in his mind, warning that the cooldown was over. Without a second thought, he gave the command to escape. The bandit slashed at empty air in frustration as Yuan passed through the portal and vanished like a ghost. He collapsed onto the floor of his bedroom, his heart almost tearing out of his chest, but alive. Once the shock faded, joy took over. He spread the gold coins across the bed, laughing to himself. That handful of cakes was worth more than a lifetime of sweat. He had 12 hours to prepare before the next trip, so he got to work organizing his stock.
The next morning, Yuan returned to the company, but he was no longer the timid kid from before. The boss came in barking, demanding the gifts from the day before, and got a blunt no to his face. Yuan made it clear he was there to grow, not to be a deluxe office errand boy. When another entitled coworker tried to order him to make coffee, Yuan simply turned his back and walked away. The entire office was stunned by the intern's audacity. The boss, purple with rage, swallowed his anger for later, promising payback. Even Rockin couldn't understand it, thinking the guy had suddenly become arrogant. But Yuan just smiled, knowing that a full pocket was what fueled that confidence. When the clock hit the mark, the portal opened again. This time, Yuan came prepared, stuffing his backpack with cans of meat stew, ready to become a millionaire. The problem was that the portal dropped him in an unknown place, in the middle of nowhere. He shouted for help, but what answered wasn't human. A rotten hand grabbed his shoulder. It was another pack of hungry zombies. Yuan tried to run, but the backpack was too heavy, turning him into an easy target. In desperation, he started opening the cans and dumping the contents on the ground. The monsters piled onto the meat like wild animals, giving him a chance to escape, but the loss hurt his soul. Every can thrown away was a fortune gone. The zombies didn't give up. They wanted fresh meat, human meat. Cornered and exhausted, Yuan realized he couldn't keep running. He opened the system and saw the option, exchange 100 grams of gold for skill points. It was a stab to the budget, but it was that or become undead dinner. He bought the basic combat package and instantly felt his body change. When a zombie lunged at Yuan, he didn't flinch. With a precise, violent move, he landed a clean kick that isolated the monster. He was furious. The zombies had made him lose money, and that was unforgivable. In the middle of the chaos, 2 survivors appeared, and to Yuan's surprise, handed him a glowing blue crystal. It was an extremely valuable item, a thank you for unintentionally saving one of their brothers by distracting the zombies with the meat. Along with the blue one, they gave him a handful of white crystals to cover any losses. The game had flipped again. The experience opened Yuan's eyes. He realized that in that cursed world, being a zombie hunter meant constant risk of death, but the profits were jaw-dropping. The group's captain, impressed by Yuan's kick, patted him on the shoulder and made an offer. He wanted the kid in the crew. Yuan, no fool, stayed quiet and didn't give an immediate answer. The captain's younger brother quickly added some poison, explaining that the boss had a habit of trying to recruit anyone who showed skill. Even without Yuan's confirmation, the captain offered him a ride to the nearest city. They got in the car and took off. In the back seat, while the younger one snored, Yuan was hypnotized by the blue crystal. He could feel that stone carried a strange energy, something far beyond ordinary.
Sure enough, the system chimed immediately. The interface detected the crystal and offered an exchange for points. Yuan accepted, watching the stone crumble in his hands and turn into 100 points in the blink of an eye. His jaw dropped. One small crystal was worth the same as 100 grams of gold. But the system also issued a inventory full warning. To fix it, it offered 1 square meter of invisible storage space for 100 points. Yuan didn't hesitate. He paid the price so he'd never again have to run from monsters with a heavy backpack. The road to the settlement was a scene of horror. The car passed through a refugee camp where misery had no end. Women and children lay on the ground, begging for scraps of food. Yuan saw a little girl approach a luxury car, her eyes sunken with hunger, asking for a crumb. Before she could finish speaking, a sharp gunshot cut through the air. The car's owner shot the girl in the chest just so she wouldn't dirty the vehicle. Yuan felt his blood boil and almost jumped out of the car, but the captain grabbed him hard. The warning was cold. In that place, the strong trample and the weak turn to dust. There is no law, no police, only power. Watching that child bleed to death while no one lifted a finger gave Yuan the motivation he lacked. He understood that if he didn't become absurdly strong and rich, the next body on the ground would be his. At the fortified city gate, a guard tried to act tough, demanding passes and tests. But the captain was already known in the area, and with some smooth talk and the right papers, managed to secure entry for his new friend. Yuan received his official pass and said goodbye to the brothers, promising they would meet again. Now alone, Yuan switched into entrepreneur mode. He pulled the cans of stew from his invisible inventory, feeling like the lead in an action movie. He was determined to turn that canned food into a mountain of gold. The village market was pure chaos, with people selling everything imaginable, even bottles of drinks from before the end of the world, at prices that would make anyone cry. He barely had time to get his bearings when a strange guy popped up in front of him, blocking his path. The man sized Yuan up, figured he had a rich look, and came in aggressively with an offer. He wanted to buy Yuan's weapon at any cost. Yuan was confused, thinking he was about to get robbed in blatant light, but the seller kept pushing. He couldn't understand why someone was so desperate to buy something he hadn't even realized was that valuable. Yuan quickly caught on that this wasn't a mugging, it was business. He noticed he was surrounded by hunters and realized that if he wanted to last more than 2 days in that hell, he needed a gun on his belt. What shocked him was how open the weapons market was, with no red tape at all. In fact, carrying a weapon was practically mandatory if you didn't want to become monster food. Smelling profit, the dealer started pitching his arsenal with a supposed discount.
The man asked for 20 blue crystals for 1 piece, but Yuan was completely broke in that currency. The shopkeeper tried to lower his standards, hoping for at least some gold, but no luck. He even said he'd trade his rifle for 200 potatoes, but Yuan didn't have a single bean to his name. He was just about to be kicked out like a beggar when he played his trump card and pulled a can of stew from his backpack. The mood changed instantly. In the apocalypse, real food was worth more than diamonds. To seal the deal and earn the merchant's respect, Yuan cracked the can open with that sharp, satisfying pop. The smell of seasoned meat filled the place, nearly making the seller drool. The guy went crazy over the stew and offered anything in his stock in exchange for 5 cans. Yuan didn't hesitate and closed the deal on the spot, walking out with a weapon under his arm. Next came ammo. The seller warned him that by village law, bullets were only sold at the official depot. Yuan rushed over and stood in a short line. When it was his turn, the price stunned him. 1 gram of gold for just 10 rounds. The clerk, clearly annoyed, laid it out straight. Bullets save lives, and life is expensive. Yuan smirked and, instead of arguing, slapped a full gold bar on the counter, asking how many boxes that would buy. The girl almost fell over from the display. She handed over all the ammo and, as a bonus, slipped him a card with her number, making it clear she was available for anything he might need. Yuan pocketed it, thinking about how money ruled every world, normal or zombie-infested. But his time in that dimension was running out, and the portal pulled him back to his bedroom. Safe at home again, he started planning ahead. Now he had enough firepower to face the undead head-on, but to get truly rich, he needed to scale up the canned food business. Right in the middle of this master plan, someone knocked on the door. Panic hit hard. A rifle and a pistol were lying in the middle of the living room, stuff that would mean life in prison in the real world. It was rocking. Yuan went into full panic mode, hiding the weapons like a madman and kicking the last pistol under the bed before opening the door, sweating bullets. She stood there, all friendly, saying she'd cooked too much and decided to bring him a meal. She found the delay strange, but he used the classic excuse that he was doing some cleaning. As he put the food in the fridge, Yuan found himself admiring her. She was pretty, kind, and cooked well. His mind drifted, imagining a married life with her, coming home tired and being welcomed with that warmth. The fantasy didn't last long. He snapped back when Rockin started walking around the apartment. Afraid she might find something indecent, he insisted he was a pure-hearted guy. But when he turned around, his blood ran cold. Rockin had noticed something metallic and shiny sticking out from under the bed.
Yuan's heart nearly jumped out of his chest. The gun was right there in plain sight, and if she saw it, his life would be over in seconds. Desperate to stop her from looking, he lunged in front of her. He misjudged the force and ended up knocking her over, falling on top of her. The moment was painfully awkward. Both of them turned red, face to face in dead silence. Yuan sprang up, stammering out a clumsy excuse and blurting out a compliment about her looks to change the subject. Rockin was speechless, but not angry. She stepped away from the bed, walked toward the door, and, trying to keep her composure, said that kind of behavior was typical boy stuff. Yuan had already resigned himself, thinking she'd hate him forever and his internship was over. But before closing the door, she glanced back and admitted she liked the compliment. He didn't even have time to process the flirting, because the portal timer never stopped. He needed supplies for the next trip. Yuan headed out, thinking about what to sell. If he brought something too high-tech, it would attract dangerous attention in that world. That's when he spotted an old man selling potatoes. The idea hit instantly. Potatoes were basic food, easy to sell, and no one would suspect dimensional smuggling. The old man was struggling with little demand and offered a 20% discount to clear his stock. Yuan didn't hesitate. "I'll take everything." He had no idea how he'd carry all those sacks, but the grandpa surprised him. The old man stretched, revealing strength that would shame many young men, and handled the delivery himself. The result was that Yuan's apartment turned into a full-on potato warehouse, with sacks stacked all the way to the ceiling. Back in the apocalyptic world, Yuan went straight to the market to test the new goods. On the way, he stopped at a blacksmith shop, where crude hand-forged weapons were being made. The master explained the advantage of blades over firearms. No ammo needed, they don't break easily, and best of all, they're silent. In the silence of the apocalypse, a gunshot is an invitation to dinner, and you're the main course. Yuan was interested, but the blacksmith didn't want gold. He was sick of coins and wanted real food. When Yuan pulled a potato from his backpack, the blacksmith nearly had a food-induced meltdown. A potato from the old world was perfect, big, clean, and shiny, bringing back memories of life before the plague. So moved was the master that he offered his masterpiece, a katana forged with zombie crystals. This sword was no ordinary weapon. The blacksmith explained it was alive. The blade absorbed monster blood to repair itself, and the more kills it made, the sharper it became. Yuan felt like he'd hit the jackpot. He traded a few packs of potatoes for a legendary weapon and immediately spent 100 system points on blade combat mastery. He was no longer a scared intern. He was a zombie executioner ready for slaughter.
Armed with a katana, Yuan headed into the forest surrounding the settlement to test the steel. Moving carefully, feeling the weapon's weight, he realized he wasn't alone. A group of zombies crept up behind him, but he didn't flinch. In one smooth motion, he drew the blade and sliced two undead in half with a single horizontal cut, as if they were made of paper. Rotten blood splashed over the katana, and just as promised, the blade seemed to vibrate, growing sharper and more eager. Yuan crouched to check the damage and collect a blue crystal when gunshots echoed nearby. A stray bullet blew through a zombie's skull right in front of him. He turned and saw a heavily armed girl complaining loudly. She was furious because the crystal from a normal zombie was so worthless it didn't even cover the cost of the ammo. Mid-rant, a level 2 monster, a bizarre creature with an absurdly long tongue, leapt out of the shadows.
The girl smiled, thinking she'd found a golden goose and unloaded on it. The problem was that the zombie was armored. The bullets bounced off without doing a thing. Before she could reload, the monster's tongue whipped out, knocked the gun from her hands, and wrapped around her like a python, squeezing the air out of her lungs. Trapped and helpless, she screamed for help. That's when Yuan stepped in. He appeared out of nowhere and with a precise katana strike, severed the creature's disgusting tongue. The zombie howled in pain, spraying foul green fluid everywhere. Yuan thought it was over, but the thing had rapid regeneration. The tongue grew back in an instant and lunged at him. He swung to block, but the impact was so strong that the katana flew from his hands. The zombie even seemed to laugh, thinking the human was defenseless. But Yuan doesn't fight fair. While the monster celebrated, he pulled out the heavy firearm he'd bought at the depot and flashed a grim smile. "You like guns? Have some." He emptied the magazine into its chest, blowing the level 2 zombie apart for good. Holding the elite crystal, he knew every bullet had been worth it. Once the adrenaline faded, he rushed to the girl. She was unconscious, and the monster's saliva was burning her skin like acid. It was a powerful toxin. With no time to waste, Yuan carried her to a nearby river and washed the wounds to remove the poison. To clean and bandage her properly, he had to remove the top part of her clothing. When the girl finally woke up, the scene was a nightmare for Yuan's reputation. She found herself without her top and saw him there too, shirtless because he'd used his own clothes to help her. The misunderstanding was instant. She refused to listen and started hurling rocks at him. With his enhanced combat reflexes, he caught one in midair and told her to calm down. He explained that he'd saved her life from the poison and that without him she'd already be dead.
She turned red with embarrassment, even angrier when he admitted he'd seen more than he should have. Trying to make peace, Yuan offered 2 potatoes as an apology. She nearly exploded. "You think my honor is worth 2 potatoes?" She shouted that she wouldn't eat them even if she were starving, but her stomach had other plans. One bite was all it took for her toughness to crumble. The flavor of that potato was unreal, but Yuan decided to raise the bar. He pulled out a jar of Chinese chili sauce, la gan ma, and offered it as a topping. The girl was stunned. Since the world ended and factories shut down, that stuff had become a legend, something no one had seen in years. When she tasted the combination, her eyes lit up. Watching her reaction, Yuan realized he was sitting on a gold mine. If the sauce was this valuable, he could become unimaginably rich reselling it. Already hooked, the girl asked the price of the jar. Yuan, in a show of pure charity, said he'd give it to her for free. She immediately grew suspicious. A jar like that was worth at least 10 gold coins. Nobody gives away something that valuable without wanting something in return. Taking advantage of the moment, Yuan asked if she wanted to keep eating the best food every day. She agreed instantly, but admitted she was broke. That's when Yuan made a suggestion that nearly got him punched. He hinted that she could use her body to pay. The girl shoved him hard, furious, guarding herself and thinking he wanted something disgusting, or worse, that he planned to sell her as food. Yuan had to laugh and explain fast before he got killed. He wanted her to be his bodyguard and work for him in exchange for food and supplies. She was furious at his stupid choice of words, but accepted the job anyway. While she kept complaining, Yuan drifted into his own thoughts, imagining the girl dressed as a bunny, but reality hit hard when she grabbed him by the collar. He apologized for the bold thoughts, and they moved on. On the way, the conversation turned serious. Yuan thought regular zombies were the only problem, but the girl laid out the monster hierarchy. She explained that the maximum level was 9, and that level 3 monsters were becoming far too common, which was a very bad sign. Level 9 was the most terrifying of all, an abyss hiding creatures so powerful they surpassed any known scale of strength. When they entered the market, a foul stench assaulted Yuan's nose. He learned that with the water shortage, people there only got a shower once a week, if they were lucky. Curious, he asked if his partner followed the same bathing diet. She turned bright red with embarrassment and swore she went to the river regularly to stay clean. Mid-conversation, a stranger ran up screaming Suno's name. That was Yuan's new partner. The woman looked desperate, babbling about new models and the fear of a wolf pack returning. Before the talk could go any further, she staggered and collapsed. Yuan caught her and immediately realized the truth. She was starving. He handed her a potato, which she devoured with contagious joy. When Yuan asked who she was, Suno said she was a neighbor, but the explanation was cut short. Shu stepped in, took control, and made the stranger introduce herself. Her name was Wenwen, a highly skilled programmer, but reality was brutal. Shu quickly shut her down, reminding her that without the internet and with computers turning into junk, her talent wasn't worth even a couple of potatoes. Wenwen was crushed, feeling like her intelligence was worthless in that harsh world. Yuan saw things differently. He cut in and encouraged her not to give up on coding. He offered a can of beans for her work because he immediately understood that the technology in that apocalypse, even in ruins, was far more advanced than in his original world. If he could make use of that knowledge, he would get insanely rich. With her eyes shining, Wenwen showed a flash drive-like device. It contained the Apocalypse Encyclopedia, a program she had compiled herself with valuable data on geography and monster types. It was rough and incomplete, but had enormous potential. Yuan didn't hesitate. He promised food and protection for her and any other starving tech geniuses she could find. Wenwen accepted on the spot, moved to tears at finally being valued for what she loved doing. Watching the scene, Suno grew jealous. She wanted a deal like that too. Yuan, sly as ever, made his offer. If she built an elite hunter clan, he would fund everything and name her the leader. She went crazy. In a burst of joy, she hugged Yuan tightly, leaving him completely flustered, then ran off. Less than half an hour later, Suno returned with a group that looked like they walked out of a war movie. They were professionals, but clearly hungry. Yuan was straightforward. He came from far away, had a full stock, and would pay for every job with real food. To show off, he opened a huge sack of potatoes in front of everyone. Some mercenaries whispered among themselves, thinking Yuan was just a rich coward who'd panic at the first zombie. One of the smart Alecs was about to try grabbing the food and running, but Yuan was faster. He fired a shot that whistled past their heads and buried itself in a tree behind them. The warning was clear. Betrayal was paid with death. With respect earned through gunfire, the group agreed to follow their new boss straight into hell if needed. The first mission didn't take long. In the middle of the forest, two zombies were shambling along, holding hands, in a bizarre moment of post-death romance. The scene ended when silver bullets blew their heads apart instantly. It was Yuan's team showing what they could do. As the boss collected the blue crystals, he gave tactical advice. Always aim for the head to avoid wasting expensive ammo. But suddenly, something emerged from between the trees, changing the mood of the hunt.
The brush parted to reveal a colossal man with a massive belly and the face of someone who had no friends. He was from the Hungry Wolves gang and didn't appreciate gunfire on his territory. He quickly spotted Suno and recognized her. The two had clashed before, and she'd already been warned not to cross their path. But this time, things were different. The rest of the pack showed up right after, surrounding Yuan's group and making their usual abusive offer. Hand over your weapons and we'll let you leave alive. Yuan, who didn't bow to bullies, shot back that it was rude to talk tough to someone pointing a rifle at you. The fat man mocked him, doubting a sword could ever be faster than a trigger. That was his mistake. In a move no one saw, Yuan's katana sliced through the air and severed the man's wrist. A scream of pain echoed through the forest as blood sprayed everywhere. With the blade pointed at the rest of the gang, Yuan delivered the message. Tell your boss the days of humiliating refugees are over. Even mutilated, the thug tried to snarl threats, claiming the Hungry Wolves could summon mutant zombies to tear everyone apart. The goons were ready to retreat, but Yuan blocked their escape. He wasn't leaving empty-handed. Under the aim of the guns, the bullies had no choice but to swallow their pride and hand over everything of value they had. Gold, supplies, and equipment. It was payment for years of cowardice against the weak. Humiliated and stripped of everything, they ran back to the gang's base to report to their leader. There, the mood turned heavy. The survivor knelt before the throne and explained how Yuan had taken over the territory and treated them like trash. The leader of the Hungry Wolves stood up, calm and deadly. He placed a hand on his subordinate's shoulder, pretending to offer comfort for the lost arm and promising brutal revenge. But the truth was far harsher. The leader had no patience for failures who gave up without a fight.
In the blink of an eye, he transformed into a monstrous wolf and devoured his own soldier in a single bite, cleaning up his own mess. Meanwhile, the atmosphere at Yuan's camp was pure celebration. Business was booming, and he decided to loosen up. He released high-quality food and drinks for everyone, paying for the feast out of his own pocket. People went all out, drinking until they dropped. The sun rose and reality hit hard. Yuan woke up with a splitting headache, surrounded by empty bottles. Still half dazed, he felt something strange and realized there was a hand on top of him. When he looked to the side, he almost had a heart attack. It was Suno. Still caught between sleep and drunkenness, she mumbled that she wanted to keep the party going. When she finally opened her eyes and it sunk in, chaos erupted. She jumped out of bed furious, demanding to know what kind of shady thing Yuan had done the night before, while he, completely blank, tried to figure out how they had ended up there. The argument between Yuan and Suno was at its peak when the programmer Wenwen entered the tent to deliver her work. What she saw was pure chaos. The two tangled up on the bed, with Suno practically on top of him. Wenwen, wearing the grin of someone who loves gossip, asked if she was interrupting the couple's moment.
They both jumped away from each other, firing off weak excuses and saying it was not what she thought. Wenwen burst out laughing. She knew very well the drinking had been heavy, and that since there was only one bed in the tent, she herself had tossed them both in there the night before. Suno, panicking when she realized she was missing some clothes, exploded, accusing the programmer of setting the whole thing up on purpose. Amid the vomiting and brutal hangover, Wenwen handed over the flash drive, assuring them the software was so simple even a child could use it. Yuan, who understood code, tried to keep up the image of a tech master, but Wenwen only pretended to believe him, curious to see how he would use it. Back in the real world, the office routine was hell. The boss, Lin Chung, acting like he owned the place, slammed a mountain of paperwork onto Yuan's desk. The plan was cruel. The intern would have to finish a week's work in a single night or lose his bonus. Rockin passed by and, seeing how desperate things were, offered help, but Yuan, with wounded pride and an ace up his sleeve, politely refused. As soon as he was alone, he plugged Wenwen's flash drive into the computer. The Apocalypse program was a digital wrecking machine. In minutes, the software not only finished all the paperwork, but also started digging into the company's system. Digging through office secrets, Yuan uncovered the rot. Lin Chung was selling secrets to a competitor and using interns to do the dirty work for the rival company. It was exactly what he needed for revenge. 2 hours later, the boss, Lin Chung, walked out of his office full of arrogance, ordering everyone to stay late without pay for an inspection. The mood among the interns was like a funeral, until Yuan stood up. With courage no one expected, he confronted his superior and questioned whether it was ethical to exploit others to benefit a competitor. Lin Chung tried to put on a show, claiming there was no proof, but Yuan slammed a folder full of printed documents onto the middle of the office. The other interns started reading, and shock spread instantly. The betrayal was all there, documented and undeniable. Lin Chung still tried to keep his tough act, shouting that he had the right to order them around, but his voice died when the company director appeared right behind him, holding the evidence of the fraud. The traitor tried to stammer out an excuse, but his fate was sealed, fired. The director, trying to put out the fire, promised fairness and said the company would change, but Yuan was done. He no longer wanted to waste time in a place surrounded by corrupt people. He quit on the spot, head held high. Inspired by Yuan's attitude, all the other interns grabbed their things and walked out together, leaving the director talking to himself in an empty office. The office felt like a graveyard. Only the director and the miserable Lin Chung remained. Because of that man's greed and stupidity, the company lost its best team when it needed the most. The director, seething with rage, gave the final order, telling him to write his resignation immediately. Lin Chung dropped to his knees, watching his career turn to dust in seconds. Outside the building, Yuan met the group who followed him out. He felt guilty and apologized, saying the issue was personal between him and the boss, and that he did not want anyone to be unemployed because of him. But the interns were relieved. No one could take that corporate slave pit anymore. The only concern was the game market, which was stagnant and tough for newcomers. That was when Yuan dropped the bomb. He was going to start his own company and wanted everyone working with him. The excitement was immediate. The group that had been treated like trash now saw a bright future ahead.
The next day, Yuan crossed the portal back into the apocalyptic village. He knew that surviving only by reselling junk would not last forever. He needed a solid business that could generate steady profit. But his thoughts were cut short by panicked screams. His allies arrived in a frenzy, warning that Suno was in real danger. The report was tense. While buying supplies, the hungry wolves had set up an ambush. To protect the group, Suno sacrificed herself, drawing the bandits away from the forest. Yuan felt his blood boil. The wolves had gone too far. He ordered everyone to gather reinforcements at the base, jumped on his motorcycle, and sped off for the rescue. Meanwhile, chaos erupted in the forest. Suno tried to shake off the gang's bikers in a frantic chase, but she was eventually surrounded. The bandits were already celebrating, ready to take her to their boss, when a loud explosion changed everything. One of the vehicles blew up out of nowhere, sending debris flying. In the confusion, one man felt something hit his face. It looked like a harmless toy, but it was a tiny bomb. His head exploded like a watermelon. Appearing on the horizon was Tina, a girl with an angelic face and demonic instincts. She found it outrageous that a bunch of cowardly men would gang up on a woman alone. With a sadistic smile, she began tossing grenades as if they were candy. The sight of bandits flying through the air made her blush with satisfaction. Crawling out of the wreckage, Suno recognized little Tina. The girl had only been hunting zombies nearby and had stumbled into the fight by chance. Suno thanked her for saving her life, remembering that she had helped Tina in the past, but she never expected the girl to awaken such destructive power. The relief did not last long. From behind a tree emerged an overwhelming presence, Scar, the leader of the hungry wolves. The villain appeared with an expression eager for amusement. One of his soldiers, barely alive on the ground, begged for help, but Scar responded with a brutal kick, showing he did not care about his own people. He became fascinated by Tina's power and offered her a place in his pack, promising luxury and food. Pretending to be naive, Tina accepted just to get close enough to unload her bombs in his face. She thought she had won, but Scar was a monster on another level. He absorbed the impact and counterattacked explosively, hurling the girl away and declaring that the real game was only beginning.
A desperate scream cut through the forest, making Yuan's blood run cold. He recognized it instantly. Sunuo's voice. In the distance, the glow of flames consuming the trees showed that the massacre had already begun. He pushed the motorcycle to its limit, but when he slammed the brakes at the battlefield, the shock nearly knocked him over. His face froze in pure horror. Scar stood victorious over the fallen bodies of Tina and Sunuo. With a sadistic grin, he mocked that the hero had arrived too late to save his princess. Rage consumed Yuan. Scar, radiating arrogant confidence, believed no one in this world could challenge him. Yuan did not hesitate. He charged in blind fury, and to the leader's surprise, landed a blow so violent it sent the brute crashing into a dry tree trunk. Yuan rushed to Sunuo's side. Even injured and exhausted, she still held on to her unbreakable pride, trying to show she was not defeated. Behind them, Scar rose from the shattered tree. Yuan's strike had not finished him. Instead, it sparked his curiosity. He wanted to test Yuan's strength and tried to catch the next punch to gauge his level. Yuan realized immediately that the bastard was far too fast. Scar began ripping stones from the ground and hurling them with cannon-like force. Yuan used every bit of agility he had to dodge the projectiles that would have blown his head apart. He knew he had to go all in. With his heart pounding, he invested every stored skill point he had been saving for expanding his company. His muscles trembled as power surged through him. When Scar attempted a final kick meant to crush him, Yuan stopped it with a single hand. The leader was stunned. The reversal was humiliating. Yuan grabbed Scar's massive body and slammed him into the ground with such force that the villain nearly choked on his own blood. Realizing he might lose, Scar played his last card. Bones cracked, skin tore, and his hands turned into monstrous paws with razor-sharp claws. Yuan watched in shock as the transformation completed. Scar became a gigantic anthropomorphic wolf.
With a guttural voice, the monster explained that Yuan was strong for a human, but the awakened were a different species. Only those who consumed zombie crystals in absurd quantities could break biological limits. The wolf lunged with impossible speed. Yuan could not react in time. Claws shredded his clothes and tore into his skin. The wolf snarled that Yuan would pay for every punch. Yuan knew he was at a disadvantage, especially with the girls unconscious nearby. He had to draw the monster away. He began taunting Scar like a stray mutt, luring him deeper into the forest. He climbed trees, trying to use the terrain to confuse the beast, but the wolf's sense of smell was far sharper than a human's.
Scar cornered him, grabbed Yuan by the throat, and slammed him against a tree, snarling that no one would ever look down on him. But to the villain's surprise, Yuan broke into a wide grin. He said he had figured out the monster's weakness. The wolf hesitated, confused. Then Yuan puffed out his cheeks and blew with all his strength straight into the wolf's face. The stench was so foul, so unbearable, that Scar's heightened senses became his greatest curse. The wolf released Yuan instantly, clutching his snout in agony. Scar the wolf was completely disoriented, rubbing his snout with his paws, trying to figure out why the smell was so unbearable. Yuan, smirking, revealed the secret. It was a special perfume made of meatballs loaded with onion, egg, and lots of garlic. If it was strong for a human, for a wolf with a keen sense of smell, it was like a tear gas grenade. Stunned, Scar tried one last blind swipe with his claw, but he left the opening Yuan needed. In a lightning move, Yuan's katana sliced through the air and cut the wolf leader in half. The victory came not just from strength, but from cleverness. Amid the monster's remains, something glimmered, a rainbow-colored crystal. As soon as Yuan touched it, the system leveled up and unlocked a new sinister skill, Zombie Lord. He could now control any undead without a crystal in its head, turning monsters into obedient minions. The joy of commanding an army of the dead was short-lived, though. A red notification popped up. He had 1 month to build a shelter for 100 people, or his life was at stake. With no choice, Yuan carried Tina and Suno back to base. By noon, things started to clear up. Tina, fully recovered, revealed her true identity. 3 years earlier, Suno had saved her, and since then she had become a respected lone hunter. Yuan found it strange that someone so young could be so dangerous, but Suno warned him, never underestimate an awakened. Tina explained the mystery. Some people, when bitten, don't turn into monsters. Instead, their bodies produce a colorful crystal in the brain that grants insane powers. In her case, Tina could turn any object into a bomb. To prove it, she touched a normal cup, tossed it out the window, and the explosion nearly blew the store apart. But the hierarchy was strict. Tina was level 3, while the late Scar had almost reached level 4. Impressed by Yuan's strength, Tina swore eternal loyalty to Yuan. Yuan accepted, thinking that if she wasn't useful in battle, at least she could cook fish with her explosions. Meanwhile, Yuan discovered who his gang was. They weren't warriors, they were farmers from Black Moon Farm whose land had been invaded by Scar's army. Since Yuan had killed the wolf leader, they were there to show gratitude, but admitted the farm was still infested with the villain's minions. For Yuan, it was music to his ears. He needed a fortress to complete the system's mission, and the farm was perfect. The girls already armed themselves, ready for battle. Upon arriving at Black Moon Farm, the scene was pure chaos. Scar's former subordinates were fighting among themselves to see who would take command. Yuan stopped the brawl with authority. If the strongest rules, I'm jumping into this game. With an epic leap from a great height, he landed in the middle of the mess, ready to seize control with brute force. The fight at Black Moon Farm turned into a spectacle of destruction. Tina, not one to hold back, blasted entire groups of enemies with terrifying ease. The farmers, rightful owners of the land, grabbed weapons to help Captain Yuan sweep the scum. In under half an hour, the field was cleared. no traitor left to tell the tale. With victory secured and Scar sent to hell, the farmers made a drastic decision. They knew without a strong leader, the farm would be targeted by vultures soon. So they handed the keys to Yuan, begging for his protection. Yuan accepted immediately. It was exactly what he needed to meet the system's goal. The farm started with 43 survivors, but the stats were dismal, everything at a low level. To turn it into a fortress, he would need mountains of gold and crystals he didn't yet have. That's when luck smiled again. Wenwen, the prodigy programmer, discovered the best-kept secret of the Hungry Wolves, a hidden safe Yuan hadn't even suspected. As she hacked the codes, Yuan could barely contain his excitement. When the heavy door finally gave way, they were faced with an absurd treasure, gold and crystals beyond measure. They were rich. But Wenwen threw cold water on their excitement. Gold doesn't fight, and they didn't have enough people to defend so much wealth. Yuan already had a grim solution in mind. He walked to the courtyard full of enemy corpses and activated the Zombie Lord skill. A ghostly blue mist spread, and to Suno's horror, the dead began to rise. She reached for her weapon to finish them off, but Yuan stopped her, explaining the zombies were now his new workers. The idea was brilliant, but execution was a disaster. The zombies were too dumb. Yuan handed them axes to chop wood, but they kept accidentally decapitating each other. Suno was losing patience with the useless workforce when Wenwen showed up with another invention, a brainwave manipulator. The plan was simple and genius. Implant a chip in the zombie's head and connect it to the control device. Yuan volunteered as a test subject, and the connection worked perfectly. He could control the undead as if it were his own body, with smooth movements and crystal clear vision. Suno found it creepy and gross, especially when Yuan felt the zombie's pain as if it were real. But his mind was already racing. He had a brilliant idea that would require the whole team's help. He started directing the zombies in choreographed action scenes, while Suno unloaded ammo under hordes under his orders. She had no idea what this filming take nonsense was, but Yuan just smiled, promising it would all make sense later. Back in the real world, Yuan stayed up all night in front of his laptop. He edited the raw apocalypse footage, added cinematic effects, epic transitions, and a soundtrack. The result was a game trailer that looked unreal, too real to be believed. Exhausted, he clicked upload, posted the video online, and slumped back in his chair, unaware that while he slept, the digital world was about to explode with the announcement of the most realistic game in human history.
Yuan's exhaustion weighed on his shoulders, but his anxiety was worse. When he opened the site to check the video's performance, he nearly fell out of his chair. The game trailer, called Dark End of the World, wasn't just a hit, it was a full-blown phenomenon. Views had already smashed past 10 million, and the internet was on fire. Yuan announced that 50 lucky people would be chosen for a closed beta test, and it felt like the whole world was trying to get in. The frenzy hit the top of the industry. Wang Xiao, the powerful CEO of Future Technology, was glued to the quality of the footage. She ordered her staff to comment, beg for a spot, do whatever it took. If the game lived up to even half of the trailer, it would be the biggest tech revolution ever, and she wasn't about to miss out. Meanwhile, real experts started analyzing the video. Zhao, a former Special Forces soldier, was blown away by the realism of the weapons and vehicles. It didn't look like CGI, it looked real. Luck struck a mix of profiles. Lao Tzu, an influencer who just hit 5 million subscribers, got the mysterious package, as did the famous streamer Lao DG. He was ready to go live and debunk the game, skeptical that any company could deliver that level of realism without cheating. Meanwhile, in the apocalyptic world, Yuan was going insane at the farm, working on the appearance of his new staff. Using his Zombie Lord ability, he remodeled the faces of 50 corpses, turning rotting monsters into perfect replicas
avatars of the chosen players. Suno watched, disgusted and confused, even asking if Yuan had some weird fetish for messing with dead bodies. He cut her off immediately, explaining the master plan. This world would be sold as an ultra-realistic holographic simulation. The zombie bodies were the players' avatars, and the brain chips handled the cross-dimensional connection. Wenwen confirmed all systems were operational, though she still doubted 50 people would appear out of nowhere. Yuan, sweating but keeping his cool, assured her the servers were ready, and the connection helmets had already been delivered to Earth. When Wenwen activated the brainwave controller, silence fell. For a moment, nothing happened, and Suno snickered mockingly. Then, suddenly, one of the corpse's eyes opened. The first player to wake up was ecstatic, looking at her hands, the sky, the ground, screaming that the graphics were better than real life. Suno almost shot her when the resurrected corpse grabbed her hand to feel her skin. The player got a sharp slap, but instead of complaining, she laughed. "The pain is real. This is amazing." Soon, the other 49 rose, including CEO Wang Xiao and the ex-soldier, all stunned by the brutal realism. To get things under control, Yuan cleared his throat, stepping fully into his role as the game master. He introduced himself as Leader Yuan, Lord of Black Moon Shelter, and welcomed them to their new life. He laid down the rules. No easy respawns. If your character died, your account was deleted, progress gone. As he explained the seriousness of survival, streamer Lao DG was already poking others, testing NPC intelligence, unaware he was dealing with real people in a world where death was deadly serious. Yuan barely finished speaking when Lao DG tested the simulation's limits. The guy approached Yuan with a knife hidden behind his back, thinking since it was a game he could stab the characters just to see what happened. But Yuan was faster. He drew his gun and shot him square in the forehead. The streamer's body convulsed on the floor, dead instantly. With his gun still smoking, Yuan issued a general warning: "Don't die, or the cost is high." The other players were shocked, but a second later, Lao DG resurrected on the spot. Instead of getting mad, he was thrilled. The experience of dying was so real, so visceral, he instantly fell in love with the game. Yuan took advantage of the quiet to lay down the golden rules. First, hurting NPCs inside the shelter was strictly forbidden. He explained that players could identify NPCs using the Observe command. When the players tested it, they saw Yuan had no player ID above his head, confirming his authority. CEO Huang Xiao asked if these rules applied outside the shelter, and Yuan confirmed that in the desert, freedom was total. If a player had the strength and guts, the world was theirs. The remaining question, how to get stronger. Yuan explained the progression system. By defeating zombies, they'd collect crystals from corpses, which acted as currency to raise attributes. Completing tasks for shelter residents would increase reputation and NPC favor, unlocking elite gear and materials. He taught everyone to access the system's mental interface to check stats, and Huang Sha was fascinated, trying to figure out how such neural interface technology was even possible. With a shot fired into the air, Yuan gave the green light. Game on. Explore until you drop. The famous influencer La Tzu, full of herself, called her followers for a grinding marathon. She was determined to be #1 and dive into any dangerous cave to level up. Her fans were hyped, but the apocalypse doesn't forgive. 3 minutes later, La Tzu and her crew were back at the respawn point, whining that the zombies were too strong to fight hand-to-hand. Defeated, she went to Yuan for missions that wouldn't kill her in 3 minutes. With a smile like a boss who loves cheap labor, Yuan assigned base tasks: plowing fields, hauling stones for houses, harvesting crops. La Tzu accepted with a face like death, realizing deep down she'd just become a virtual slave, but she had no other option to earn points. Yuan was laughing inside, watching the players work for free to build his fortress, but one of them caught him off guard. The ex-soldier Xiao Ji appeared behind him, not to beg for an easier task, but to buy weapons. The guy's hands were already full of red crystals. Yuan's jaw dropped. "How did you get so many so fast?" he asked.
The veteran, calm as someone who'd seen plenty of war, explained that killing zombies was basic, but he needed real firepower to clear the area. Impressed with the player's skill, Yuan gave him a special discount and handed over an elite weapon. Xiaoji lifted the rifle, felt its weight and balance, and said, "This is way too real. Not a game, this is a battlefield." Yuan promised that if Xiaoji kept up the pace, the shelter would unlock even higher-tier weapons. The ex-soldier didn't wait for praise. He ran straight to the field, hungry for more action. As Yuan watched him disappear over the horizon, he felt a tap on his shoulder. It was the powerful CEO, Huang Xiao, curious about the luxury item shop. Yuan explained the rules. Without corpse crystals and reputation points, she wouldn't get even a slingshot. Huang Xiao smirked arrogantly. Used to calling the shots, she thought the game was just another money grab for the rich. She tried to pay with her credit card, but Yuan shut it down immediately. No donations or external payments allowed. The CEO went ballistic. Her money was useless? She threatened to buy Yuan's whole operation if he kept blocking her. That's when Yuan decided to assert control. He stepped forward, put a finger under her chin, and made it clear. In this world, her cash was worthless. Break the shelter's rules, and the punishment would be severe. Huang Xiao boiled with rage, treating him like a sassy NPC. But Yuan just turned his back, using the system's standard line, "Good luck, as long as she didn't break the law." Of course, rich people find a way. Huang Xiao gathered the other players in the courtyard and announced she'd pay huge sums in real money for every crystal they delivered. The black market exploded instantly. Players farmed like crazy, handing over everything. Yuan watched, realizing that with money, humans will corrupt even the apocalypse. Soon, the CEO appeared with a bag stuffed with crystals, trading them for elite gear. In the following days, the farm became a hectic construction site. Players did everything to earn points and level up. Suno was shocked. She couldn't understand why everyone was happy cleaning pigsties, fixing roofs, and harvesting weeds under the blazing sun. To her, they were tireless corpse dolls who never complained about hard work. 3 days later, a high-level meeting at Black Moon Farm brought great news. Wenwen reported that the base was being rebuilt at record speed thanks to the players' insane energy. The shelter was ready to expand and take in more people. Yuan was grinning at the progress, but the mood shifted after the meeting ended. Wenwen, serious-faced, asked Yuan to stay a bit longer to talk privately. Suno, never missing a chance to tease, whispered jokes about something extra going on between them. Yuan cut it off immediately, telling her to leave, but he was curious. What could the programmer want to discuss in secret?
Alone in the room, the tension thickened. Yuan tried to stay calm, telling her she could ask anything. Wenwen didn't waste time. Who's controlling the brainwaves of these zombies? Yuan felt the hit. There's no hiding anything from a sharp girl like her. To protect the dimensional game, he told a bold lie. Some filthy rich folks in the main settlement were funding everything just for fun, as if it were a new toy. Wenwen wasn't fully convinced, but Yuan put a hand on her shoulder and begged for trust, swearing everything he was doing was for everyone's survival. Seeing his desperation, she agreed to help with her coding. Out of nowhere, Sunuo appeared in the room, saying she was on board too and would use her weapons to protect the boss's secrets. But peace didn't last. A commotion outside caught their attention. Streamer Lao DG had broken into a villager's house in broad daylight, grabbing everything he could. To him, it was an open-world game, and searching an NPC's house was mandatory. The homeowner was furious, demanding justice, especially since the stranger took his underwear. Lao DG, acting cocky, said he was just testing the equipment. Yuan knew he had to act, but he didn't want to ruin the streamer, who was his best publicity. He decided to settle it gladiator style, a hand-to-hand duel. If the streamer lost, he'd pay double for what he stole. Lao DG, trained in real-life kung fu, thought he could thrash the bot. Sweet delusion. The villager, battle-hardened from years fighting zombies, pummeled the streamer without mercy. Fist after fist drained the guy's HP in seconds. Yuan just watched, knowing no modern human could stand against someone surviving the apocalypse daily. Defeated and humiliated, Lao DG apologized and paid his debt with a giant red crystal. Yuan gave a warning. Anyone causing trouble in the shelter would feel the full force of his hand. In the real world, the internet was melting down. Every LAN cafe was packed with kids glued to Lao DG's reviews, counting down to the official release of the masterpiece. Even influencer Lao Tzu was holed up in her room, finishing her beta gameplay video. When hunger hit and the beer ran out, she dashed to the store. In the beverage aisle, she reached for the last can of her favorite drink, but another hand touched it at the same time. It was Yuan. Gentleman that he was, he offered her the drink. Lao Tzu thanked him, but froze as she studied his face. It was too familiar. Shock hit her. This was Leader Yuan from the game. Half an hour later, they were drinking in her apartment like old friends. She couldn't believe the genius behind the divine game seemed so normal. Yuan kept up the disguise, claiming he was the producer who personally entered the game to guide his team and ensure perfection. Lao Tzu was impressed with his dedication, unaware the game's server was actually in another dimension.
Yuan returned the compliment, saying he didn't expect an internet celebrity to live so down to earth. Glancing around her room, he noticed the chaos, a total mess that clashed with the glamorous image she projected online. Lao Tzu insisted her fans loved her for her skills and personality, not just her looks. Yuan teased that it was a waste since she was stunning. She blushed but deflected, saying the game would be a massive hit if he mastered marketing. Seizing the opportunity, Yuan switched into market research mode. He asked what the game needed to be perfect. Lao Tzu didn't hesitate. The content was lacking, and the game desperately needed dungeons for players to explore and challenge themselves. She added a golden tip: he should stop acting like a rigid NPC and experience the world as a normal player to feel the problems firsthand. The idea hit Yuan like lightning. Overcome with excitement, he hugged her tightly and ran off to implement the plan. Lao Tzu stood there, half offended, muttering that the crazy guy hadn't even asked her name and had called her by her streamer nickname. Back in the other world, Yuan activated experiment mode in the system. He spent 500 points to create a level 1 dungeon, the Zombie Jungle. It was dense, dangerous, with a level 2 boss that promised a real challenge. He installed a portal in the middle of the camp and announced the update. Entry cost just 1 topaz, with generous rewards for survival. Players went wild. Following Lao Tzu's advice, Yuan decided to blend in with the users. He spent another 100 points on a radical transformation skill. The process was intense. His body shifted, his face changed, and he grew long silver hair. Now a complete stranger, he was ready to play as any random noob. Meanwhile, streamer Lao DG was already in the courtyard forming a team for the dungeon. They were missing 3 players. Yuan, in his new form, approached and tapped her shoulder asking to join. Lao Tzu was impressed by the stylish new player, but eyed him suspiciously. Those eyes seemed familiar. Yuan gave a casual excuse and urged her to start the mission. Before entering the portal, 2 high-level players tried to crash the group, demanding half the rewards. Lao Tzu, ever proud, sent them packing. Yuan chuckled at her stubbornness, relieved he hadn't been recognized. At the portal entrance, the mood was grim for some. Several groups were already coming out, defeated, complaining that the challenge was impossible or their gear was garbage. Lao Tzu puffed out her chest, declaring, "I'm going to be the first to clear this dungeon." But fate loves to prank. As soon as she spoke, the portal glowed and ex-soldier Xiaoji emerged, panting and victorious. He had already completed the challenge. The air froze. Lao Tzu, mortified, backpedaled. Being first wasn't so important. Survival experience mattered. Who cares about a trophy, right? She muttered, trying to save face.
Yuan, infiltrated in his new body, handed Xiaoji a healing item. Guessing his supplies were running low, he added a warning: watch out for other groups, people are eyeing your progress. Xiaoji thanked the stranger, but tension flared when one of Yuan's team members complained, saying he shouldn't hand out valuable items to rivals. Yuan shut him down sharply. The conflict only de-escalated when another teammate stepped in to calm things. With the team ready, the portal activated. The system announced,
3 seconds to teleport, 60 minutes on the clock, and a single objective: kill the boss. As they stepped into the zombie jungle, Lao Tzu marveled at the visuals, praising the creator for listening to her suggestions. Yuan teasingly asked if she knew the creator personally. Wanting to impress, she lied, claiming they were close and that he had even taught her a few tricks. Her lie was cut short by a scream. A nest of mutant snakes emerged from the shadows, sliding fast with jaws open, ready to strike. Lao Tzu's biggest weakness? Snakes. She froze in fear. Yuan, lurking in the shadows to protect the group, began slicing the reptiles while shouting not to panic. They were fragile and fell with a single precise strike. Caught between terror and rage at the twisted rules of the dungeon, Lao Tzu shut her eyes and grabbed a snake slithering toward her. With a surge of brute strength, she tore the creature in half with her bare hands. Yuan watched, slightly disappointed at the lack of technique, but there was no time to comment. A shout broke through. The guy in their group had been bitten on the arm. Thinking he was about to die, he started saying goodbye to life, but another teammate assured him the venom was weak and could be sucked out. What followed, a man sucking venom from another man's arm, was so bizarre that everyone averted their eyes, embarrassed. Taking advantage of the distraction, Lao Tzu pulled Yuan into a secluded spot among the trees, tears in her eyes. She admitted she'd also been bitten, but was too embarrassed to tell anyone. Yuan realized the situation was serious. If the venom wasn't removed within 5 minutes, she'd be eliminated from the game. The problem? The bite was on her chest. The tension was suffocating, and the embarrassment was total. Lao Tzu, expecting Yuan to refuse, had already resigned herself to a digital death, but he didn't turn away.